Four-time Grand Slam women's tennis champion Naomi Osaka has withdrawn from the French Open, citing mental health issues. It comes after Osaka announced she would not participate in post-match press conferences at Roland Garros. She'd been fined and threatened with disqualification. Tracy Holmes is the host of the ABC program and podcast Ticket, and she joins us now. Tracy, g'day. So kind of shock news this morning. I guess maybe not shock for some people, but a lot of people thought there would be some kind of compromise reached. Take us through what's happened.
Yeah, I think probably it didn't look like there was going to be any compromise. It was a real standoff. So Naomi Osaka put on her social media accounts before the tournament began, look, in the interest of mental well-being, I don't like doing those press conferences. I won't be doing them at the French Open because I want to be able to focus on the game. That kind of spiralled out of control to a point yesterday where the presidents of all four federations that look after the Grand Slam, so the G4 of tennis, if you like, that's the French, the US, Wimbledon and the Australian Opens, put out this statement saying that, we all care for mental well-being. However, the rules say this. If you look at the rules very carefully, they say that if you don't turn up to a press conference, you'll be fined. That's the extent of it. If you go down a little further, it starts talking about egregious behaviour. And this is the point they referred to. And they said if there's more than a couple of incidents of so-called egregious behaviour, we have the right to suspend you from playing in Grand Slams. That was a pretty harsh message seen by some, or could have been interpreted by some, as a bit of a threat. So in the end, she said, well, if that's the case, I'm pulling out. And yes, a lot of people, I wouldn't go so far as to say mocked, but certainly questioned her initial statement about mental well-being, saying, well, if you're not that you should pull out altogether. And it's since come out from her social media accounts that she's struggled with long bouts of depression. She's really very uncomfortable speaking to the world's media, has very high levels of anxiety before every press conference. And so this is what she's dealing with.
Before now, Naomi Osaka seemed to have a relatively good relationship with the media, like compared to a lot of other tennis players. So I guess this has come out of the blue for a lot of the media?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's always been strained. You could tell from day one, and I don't think it changed very much that she was not comfortable speaking to the media ever, even though she's a person who clearly spends a lot of time thinking about issues bigger than herself, bigger than her match, bigger than the tournament, but what's happening in the world. And we saw that at the US Open, where she turned up at every match with a Black Lives Matter mask on, with a name every day, a new name of someone who died at the hands of police brutality.
And some would say if she's willing to make a stand on an issue like that, use her platform to publicise something like that, then it's surprising that she finds it hard to handle the media?
No, I don't think so, because I don't think they're the same thing. You can have a moral compass and you can have ethical standards that you won't walk by. That doesn't mean you're naturally comfortable speaking to media who questions are coming from everywhere. Some people are not comfortable, you would know this, Joe, from reporting. Some people are really not comfortable in front of a camera. Times that by 50 if you're talking about these press conferences that you turn up to and there's a room full of people. So I don't think that the two are comparable. I think those are separate issues.
Were the organisers in a difficult position, though, because if they were to allow this to happen, then who knows how many tennis players would refuse to give media conferences at the end of games?
Yeah, I think what we have to recognise is that anything that is mandated in such a way probably is a little bit out of an era from yesterday. And I think more needs to be taken into account individual cases on a case-by-case scenario. I don't think anyone should have made a young tennis player who's a four-time Grand Slam champion. She's one of the best in the world. She's the highest paid female athlete in the world. And that's not because of her turning up at press conferences. That's because of the way she plays tennis and the other things she represents, those bigger issues we've talked about. And so these need to be looked at in a case-by-case situation. And she shouldn't have to make her own personal mental issues public in order for people to understand. You know, she's done so because she's now had to withdraw from one of the 4 majors.
Could this be a bit of a turning point in what happens at major tournaments with media conferences?
I hope so, and I hope so for everybody's benefit. You know, some people are very comfortable talking to the media. We know there's a lot of extroverted tennis players, and that's fantastic, but not everyone is in that boat. And I actually put this question to Graham Arnold, who's the coach of the Olyroos and the Socceroos, and I said, you know, where do you sit on this? And he said, look, he's got within his team about 6 players who are completely uncomfortable. He would never ask them to front the media. He has the benefit of a team where he can send someone else out instead. But he said it's just not on. What you want from a player is for them to be the best they can be mentally. And if that means they don't want to speak to the media, then they shouldn't have to speak to the media.
Okay, Tracy, you wrote a piece that was online last night. Are you going to update now that she's...
not really, because I think everything I said is kind of, you know, what has unfolded.
Yeah.
And I think we just need to be careful with these things, you know, trivialising people when they just mention mental well-being.
Yeah.
And I don't think it should be a situation where your mental well-being has to suffer before we listen. I think everybody should have the right to be able to make sure that they can maintain their mental well-being and not have to get to a situation where they've collapsed or struggling before we listen. You know, I think preservation is something we need to look at, and athletes are no different to anybody else.
Okay, we'll leave there. Tracy Holmes.
Thanks, Joe.